Welcome to episode 75 of the Civil War Breakfast Club. Fucker. You always get me with the intro. What is she pretending to be 50 Cent in the halftime show?
Exactly what that was. Exactly what that was. You were saying?
Anyway, welcome to episode 75 of the Civil War Breakfast Club. Tonight, I'm going to do a throwback intro and say I'm joined by the most awesome Civil War nerd I know, even if he doesn't own a Monocacy hoodie, Darren Weeks. I'm his co-host, Mary, and I'm proud to say that I do own a Monocacy hoodie.
Wow, that was absolutely worth staying up all night for that intro. Good job. Well done. Well done.
I told you it was be the worst intro ever.
Oh, it was.
I mean,
fantastic.
we're three quarters of the way to 100, and I get to do the intro to episode 75. And
75. Wow.
And it was just as much of a train wreck as our Valentine's Day episode intro was.
It's amazing how you do this 26. Intro every other week, and every single week it gets a little bit not better. It's amazing.
I know. It's like a train wreck, right?
It's good. It's good. So anyway, what's going on?
Kind of like I'm trying to think of which Civil War general that is like that. You know, he started off really awesome, but then he ended up sucking at the end.
Oh well, there's quite a few of those. We can talk about some of those tonight, perhaps. So what's going on? How's your day?
Good. It's been busy, which is I'm totally cool with. But yeah, February. We're halfway through February, which means we're almost to March, which means spring is almost here. So that's good. How about you? How are you?
Same. It's great. Life is good. A little snow over the weekend. It's getting a little bit lighter in the morning, although it was really cold today. So we got some good stuff coming up, some fun stuff coming down the pike. And tonight we get to record. We get to do yet another podcast, episode 75. Who the hell would have thought we'd make it a 75?
I know, it's crazy. 3/4 of the way to 100. That's wow, which means we have to start. Yeah, see, I can see the Mary McClellan math skills have gotten. I've come a long way since. What was that? You asked me what percentage of casualties there were at. Was that second bull run or first bull run or something like that?
That's like 100 years ago. But anywho. So I guess you're hosting. So I think you have a very important question you need to ask me.
I do. What are you drinking tonight?
Oh,
sir?
You never ask. I'm drinking Treehouse Snow because it's snowing out, because it snows all the time now. And I'm drinking it out of my Abraham Lincoln mug because this episode tonight we're going to talk about is sort of the result of a proclamation he issued on January 1st, 1863, which will be a big part of this episode. What about yourself?
I am drinking Roman Candle by Bellwoods Brewing out of Toronto, which is one of my favorite Canadian breweries now. They've kind of topped Collective Arts for me. And I'm drinking it out of my first Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry mug, which the awesome John LaRoe, I think he sent us both one of these. So that's pretty awesome. He did?
Yeah. So I didn't get that one. Awesome. I got a different one.
I know. You got Tilden and you got another one too, right?
That was pretty cool. I got some good stuff. So yeah. So
that's awesome.
So this is fun. So it's February. It's cold. So I figure, why not do like every old person does, Mary, and take a trip down to Florida?
That's what every Canadian over the age of 60 does. They go down to Florida.
And while we're heading to Florida for this episode, we can discuss one of the bloodiest battles ever fought in the Civil War, the Battle of Olustee, also known as the Battle of Ocean Pond. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So that'll be a good time. But before we get started, Mary, not to jump ahead, but when this battle is over, the total casualty count percentage on both sides is going to be a whopping 27%, which is equal to Chickamauga. It's higher than Shiloh, and it's just 3% less than the Battle of Gettysburg. So needless to say, this is the biggest Civil War battle that's ever going to be fought in the state of Florida. Not a lot of people study it.
No, they don't. And Florida is one of those ones where you kind of think like, oh, not much is going on there during the Civil War, but you have, one of the bloodiest, if not the bloodiest battle of the Civil War, like just based on like percentage of casualties, is fought there. And it's pretty significant, when you think about who's fighting there. Like, you have the United States colored troops fighting there as well. And there's some names that aren't really, we don't know their names that much. You think about one of the Union commander there, General Truman Seymour. I was doing some research about him, and he actually led a really interesting career in the Civil War, and nobody talks about him. We'll get to this, but he was at the very beginning of the war, and he was at the very end of the war.
He's kind of like the northern version of Joe Johnson. can't talk today. Joseph Johnston, same type of deal. But
Yep.
to understand Olustee, Mary, is kind of really to understand the importance of Florida and really why each side really wants to hold it. When the war started, Robert Anderson was trying to defend, Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina on April 12th, 1861. Union forces were also landing at that same time at a place called Fort Pickens in Pensacola, Florida, on the panhandle of Florida, just south of Alabama, just east of Mississippi. And really, once they got there, Union forces under Colonel Henry Brown and the rebels in the state basically spent the next day, 30 days or so, just staring at each other.
Just going to stare?
You're just going to stare at each other? And the fort is going to remain in Union control. Now, the Rebs did try to seize that fort in October of 1861. This was known as a Battle of Santa Rosa Island. But for the most part, they were repelled, and the Union maintained that fort and that presence really throughout the war in Florida, to be honest. The Union also controlled other parts of northern Florida, places like Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Ferdinand Beach, places like that. And really it was tough because to defend itself in the war, Florida, for the most part, had groups of militias.
Well, there's such a small population. There are only 140,000 residents it's the smallest population wise of the Confederate States.
But most of the men who signed up for the Confederacy got pulled out and sent elsewhere. There were 15,000 men from Florida who fought in the American Civil War for the Confederacy, and most fought in places like Virginia or Tennessee or Eastern and Western theaters. Now Florida, despite that it's a very pro-Southern state that really embraced the Confederacy, was really ignored by Richmond for the most part. As I mentioned before, they had 15,000 guys who fought, but they didn't keep them in state. They shipped them out. And January of 1862, the Confederate government, did take control of the defenses of Florida. But for the most part, they were left to fight for themselves by those local militias. And despite how important the resources of Florida were, now, the people who recognized how important Florida was not the Confederacy. It was the Union, especially in Ohio, and Mary, named Quincy Gilmore, who was a major general. Now, he was the commander of the Department of the South. He was best known really from the South for being one of the heroes of Fort Pulaski and that bombardment in Savannah. But what Gilbert saw in Florida was a state that was extremely weakly defended. But, when January 1st, 1863 happened, the Emancipation Proclamation was taking effect. The raw source that he saw that he really needed to have was those emancipated slaves who, by that proclamation, were now able to fight for the Union. And, in the American Civil War, looking at some numbers, there were about 180,000 Black soldiers who fought in the American Civil War. Okay. About 55%, about 100,000 came from Confederate states, of which a little more than 1,000 did come from Florida. So there was a resource that the Union wanted to have.
And the other things that, that Gilmore recognizes too from the state are that, there's the possibility that he could establish a pro-union government there because he thinks it's just militias fighting there. As well, it's, if he invades it, it could be a way to sever some of these supply routes that they have coming out of Florida too. But also just to go in there and recruit these African-American soldiers that he needs because of the emancipation.
It was a big part of it. It really, really was. So to that end, on February 4th, 1864 now, Gilmore is going to order the aforementioned Brigadier General Truman Seymour. We'll talk about him in detail. He's in charge of the District of Florida, and he's going to take troops from South Carolina and begin that invasion of Florida. Now, Seymour, he's a solid New Englander, Mary. I don't know if you know this. He's from Vermont, from Burlington.
Yes.
Great place up there. Graduated from West Point, class of 1846. That star-studded class with
big class with McClellan and Stonewall, Jesse Reno, Stoneman, Pickett. I think.
And don't forget Patty O'Rourke.
Yep, exactly.
No.
Yeah. No.
I
was like, I thought you were going to say, for some reason, I thought you were going to say Darius Couch, and I'm like,
Darius Couch. No, you got the big four: McClellan, Jackson, Reno, and Peggy. You got the big four. But he graduated like 18th or 19th in that class, so he was towards the upper half. Again, a guy not really many people know. He fought in Mexico. He was brevetted at the Battle of Churubusco as well as Contreras. He was stationed, and I know where you're going with this, Mary. He was stationed at Fort Moultrie heading into the secession crisis. And he was going to be with Robert Anderson at Sumter. He's going to actually command one of the artilleries.
Yeah, he was. And he was, so he was at Fort Sumter. And then after that, so he fights in the Peninsula Campaign. He's at Gaines Mills. He's at Glendale. He's at Malvern Hill. He's in a lot of these prominent battles with the Army of the Potomac. He's at Second Bull Run, South Mountain, Antietam. But after this, after Antietam in November 18th, 1862, so before the Battle of Fredericksburg happened, so he's obviously not part of that, he gets sent to the Department of South, and he's in charge of the District of Florida. And he's actually going to be the guy that commands the unsuccessful attack at Fort Wagner.
Yeah, he's going to be the guy who puts that 54th Massachusetts in the front, right?
Yep.
Now, the thing about Seymour, Mary, he's an aggressive fella to a fault.
He
right?
is.
He's that go guy, you know?
That's what I like, kind of picked up about him when I was reading about all these battles he was in, and just, even in the Mexican-American War, it sounded like he was pretty aggressive as well.
He was. Now, the thing, a little too aggressive at Battery Wagner, because you know what happens? He gets hurt. He gets hit by a shell.
Yep.
So he's going to be put on the DL for a little while. So when Gilmore's looking to send Seymour down from South Carolina to Florida, this is his first mission since Battery Wagner.
Yeah.
So since his wounding. So the fun fact about, I don't know if you know this, Mary, a fun fact about Truman Seymour, he was an accomplished painter.
I was just going to say watercolor.
I'm talking portraits, not houses. I mean, this guy you could still go to museums today and probably see his stuff in Europe.
You can, yeah, because see, he wasn't like, he's not like a Van Gogh. He's not like that type of famous, but apparently in Europe he was quite popular, and the style that he painted in was watercolor. But you can go to Europe and you can see his paintings in some museums. And he actually passes away in Europe, in Florence, Italy.
Yeah, I think he's buried in Italy. I think I remember that.
Yeah, he passes away in Florence, Italy, because that's where he went post Civil War.
Yeah, good for him. Good for him. So Seymour is going to amass an army of about 5,500 guys under 3 infantry brigades from New York and New England. He's going to have 1 brigade of cavalry from Massachusetts. He'll have some artillery from Rhode Island, and he will move south into Florida like a big mass of snowbirds. They're all going to head down, all these northeast guys. Right?
That's what happened on November the 8th, 2021, when the border opened. There was a huge mass of snowbirds that went down there.
But with this 5,500-man army pouring towards Florida, the Rebs are not going to sit idly by, Mary. No. They're going to get wind of this, and they're also going to organize an army to try to defend Florida. This task is going to fall under the responsibility of Brigadier General Joseph Finnegan, who is the commander of the Department of East and Central Florida. Yeah, right.
It's Beauregard that actually figures Seymour out that he's headed to Florida.
Right, Beauregard's going to be the one who's going to send the orders, but Finnegan's going to be the guy who's going to get sent down. Now, he's an Irish guy, Mary. He hails from County Monaghan in Ireland, of all places. So he's another Irish guy fighting the Confederacy, like your Franklin boy there from the Battle of Benjamin Franklin, Patrick Cleburne, right? Mm-hmm. And so the thing about him is interesting about Finnegan is he'll move to Florida in 1830 from Ireland, and he will amass a fortune building railroads. And he's going to be this railroad tycoon, right? Yep. I don't know if he had a mustache to twist, one of those guys, but he was one of those dudes. I'm
looking at a picture of him. He has like the goatee, and it's kind of long, so he probably was like, I don't know.
He probably did. When the war begins, he has a 40-room mansion in Ferdinand, Florida. This is a rich dude. He'll join the Confederacy soon after April of 1862. He'll assume command of that Southern forces in Central and Eastern Florida that I mentioned. Fun fact about that mansion, Mary. You know what happened to that mansion after the war? That 40-room mansion. It was seized by the Freedmen's Bureau. It was the orphanage for Black children.
Oh so my God! There's our Howard reference.
Yes, there you go. So,
Team OO for the win.
So he eventually sued and ended up getting it back. So he was theoretically, I guess, a robber baron who kicked kids out of an orphanage. I guess theoretically,
Jeez, what a bastard.
But that's what they did to him. So in February of 1864, he'll get this task to defend Florida. From Beauregard there. Yeah. And, his role is simple. You want to stop Seymour's troops from moving on Jacksonville and try to hold the state and its supplies in the Confederacy. Now, Florida was a prime beef producing state at the time. So that was part of it too. And Finnegan was no dummy, Mary. He knew that he had an extremely tough task defending Florida.
Yeah.
And he knew in Florida, Mary, would be no day at the beach. See what I did there? Okay, there you go. That's why there you go. And that's why you're the best right there, Mary. But the army he put together though was similar in size to Seymour's. He had about 5,000 guys. And he's going to have 5,000 under 2 brigades of Floridians and Georgians, and some cavalry under a guy named Colonel Caraway Smith, who's going to be mixed of Georgia and Florida as well. Now, Finnegan's going to set up his camp at a place called Olustee, Florida, Mary, which is just south of Ocean Pond. It's about 50 or so miles west of Jacksonville. He thought at the time that his army was probably too weak to do much against the Union. If Seymour tried to get around his flank and cut him off, he probably thought he was screwed. Or that's so it would seem. But we're going to see when this battle kind of unfolds here, how his mindset kind of changes. So fast forward, Mary, to February 14th, 1864. You know what day that is?
It would be Valentine's Day. It's also Hancock's birthday, and the day that William Tecumseh Sherman passes away.
Wow. Okay. I would have accepted any of the 3, but congratulations, you got all 3.
No, 3
General. Okay, well, there you go. Ooh, all right. So Gilmore, that Union general, he's gonna on Valentine's Day. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, Mary, but he's gonna meet with Seymour in Jacksonville. Okay, and Gilmore's gonna tell Seymour, listen, here's the deal. I know you're aggressive, but I want you to stay in Jacksonville. I want you to build defenses because I don't think your army's strong enough to go inland and do anything yet. So just cool your jets, take it slow, maybe take a Jaguars game in, just stay in Jacksonville and just chill. And at this point, Gilmore thinks he's got his point across, and he's going to head back to South Carolina, and he's going to leave his army in the hands of Truman Seymour. But
he's got other ideas. He's kind of like one of these, kind of reminds me of Lucius Polk, where it's like they're not orders, they're kind of guidelines. And if he feels that he needs to go outside of them for whatever reason, he will. So he ends up.
Do you remember when like your parents would go away for the weekend? They would tell you, Mary, don't have a party, and you sit there and go, I absolutely will not. The second the car took the corner, the Labatts came out, and the pile of friends came over.
Totally.
That's kind of what he does with this. He's told to stay put and not move.
Yeah.
But literally, the second Gilmore leaves, he sees an opportunity here, man.
He does. He goes in and he does several raids in northeast and north central Florida, and he encounters little resistance, and he sees several Confederate camps. He gets some artillery pieces, and he liberated some slaves, which is what, they wanted. They wanted those slaves, and even though they're not supposed to be enslaved at that point, of course, the Confederates aren't listening, but they needed those African-American troops, right? So anyway, this kind of makes them think like, wow, like I'm not encountering much resistance. Just how far can I go here? And can I set up that government that the Union wants, that pro-Union government? Because all I'm encountering is militia. So he's getting, I think, a little bit like arrogant as it's going along and thinking, yeah, I got it. I mean, that Gilmore guy told me that, my troops weren't ready for this, but they are.
Well, he sees the Suwannee River. There's a railroad bridge that's crossing the river. And he decides he's going to take his army west, and he's going to destroy this bridge. And that's what he's going to do. And he pulls out his pen, and he's going to write a letter to Gilmore. And Gilmore probably had just sat down on his ottoman back in South Carolina with his chair with a nice drink, jacket, right?
Yeah.
And he sits down, and the letter, I quote her the letter. Here's what the letter said that he wrote to Gilmore. The excessive and unexpected delays experienced with the locomotive, which will not be ready for 2 days, compelled me to remain where my command can be fed, and not enough supplies can be accumulated to permit me to execute my intentions of moving to the Suwannee River. But now I propose to go out without supplies with the object of destroying the railroad bridge. So Gilmore gets this letter, and he's thinking he's going to stay put. This letter, Gilmore's probably reading this going like 3 times going, I didn't tell him to do this, but he's telling me he's going to do it anyway.
I told you, they're not orders, they're guidelines.
And so not only is he going to leave Jacksonville, he's going to do it without supplies. So you know what Gilmore does? He's like, he sends an officer to Jacksonville to say, dude, slow your roll.
Yeah.
But the officer gets there. Guess where Seymour is? Gone.
Yeah.
He's not there anymore. He's
just disappeared. Did he just disappear?
He just
didn't know where he was.
Like a Friday night, waiting for the phone to ring, never came. When the phone rang, you knew it wasn't Seymour. That's who it was. Okay. So he's already gone, and it's too late. In the obvious issue for Seymour, okay, forget, Gilmore's, whatever. Seymour's going now. The problem with Seymour, besides the fact he has no supplies, he is completely oblivious to the 5,000 man army that Finnegan has at Olustee that's going to be sitting waiting for him. So you can kind of see where this one's going.
Yeah, it's not like he is not expecting to encounter like an army like what Finnegan has at all. He's expecting what he's encountered all the way along on his little like jaunt through Florida, that it's just going to be militia. He's going to be able to liberate some slaves and recruit them into the army and all that. He's not expecting
things
what
will
he's
go
about
wrong.
to get.
That's why we have orders. Is it possible you misinterpreted them, sir? No, sir. But so when Gilmore is, Finnegan is going to be set up now. Finnegan is going to move his army to a really, really good defensive point along the Olustee Railroad. Now, there's a small little corridor, okay? So it's basically a road that has the approach that goes through there. It's basically highway number 90 now in modern days, right?
Yeah.
It has really impossible to pass swamps on both sides, and it's got that ocean pond just to the north. So it's kind of one way in, one way out. It's kind of a tough spot. It's a great location to defend. It's even a better location, Mary, to pull an ambush, right?
Yep.
And that's what Finnegan is going to do. He's going to entrench his men at Olustee, and he's going to wait for Seymour's arrival and ambush him at that location. Well, I mean, that's the plan anyway.
Yeah. And they had built strong earthworks too, because what he wants to do is he wants to draw Seymour in to that position. Mm-hmm. This is where they've built their earthworks. This is where Finnegan and his men need to fight. And that's not at all how this goes down.
Oh, I mean, Seymour's army, on the northern side, like I said, he's got 3 brigades just to set up how this is going to roll. He's got one under a New Yorker named William Barton, the second under Joseph Hawley, and a third under James Montgomery. We'll talk about him in a little while. He commands that brigade of all USCT guys. He's also got a cavalry commanded by a guy named Gus Henry, as well as artillery by John Hamilton. Now, they will leave a place called Barber's Plantation in a town called McClenny, Florida. And it's about halfway between Jacksonville and Olustee, and just west of the town of Baldwin, if you're familiar with Florida. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of in the north and in the central. And they are going to travel in 3 parallel lines right along that Highway 10, if it's modern day.
Yeah, they're basically going along the Florida. They're basically going kind of along the Florida and Atlantic and Gulf Central Railway.
Right. They're going to use a railroad as kind of a pivot point, what they're going to do. So on February 20th of 1864, a guy named Henry Little, Mary, he won the Medal of Honor, and he's part of the 7th New Hampshire we're going to talk in detail about. He's going to write, "At daybreak, we quietly fell into line and crossed the southern fork of the St. Mary's River and started for the front. It was one of those beautiful Floridian days." So you just picture them walking. It's nice and warm. They're chilling.
Yep.
But by early afternoon, that beginning part, that vanguard, if you will, of Seymour's men are going to begin to bump into rebel cavalry, that guy Caraway Smith I mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Now,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to Caraway Smith, he has a really good quote describing how this whole battle starts, right? Smith is in charge of the rebel cavalry, like I mentioned. He writes, "I discovered the enemy about 4 miles distance from our camp, occupying in force the second crossing of the railroad from Olustee," right? "I immediately imported this fact and directed Clinch," that would be Colonel Duncan Clinch of the 4th Georgia Cavalry, "to advance a body of skirmishers, of which the regiment was to attack the enemy's pickets, which he promptly did when they were met with a much larger force of enemy, which compelled them to retire." So picture how this is going now. You've got a cavalry force and a picket line, and now you've got Seymour's guys who are coming in waves, right? And when this whole thing starts, for the most part, it's kind of 50-50. It's 5,500 guys for the Union, 5,000 guys for the Confederacy. But the element of surprise is going to quickly disappear in the Confederacy.
Yeah, it does. And they're out there. And poor Seymour assumes he's just facing militia that he had fought against previously. So he's caught a little bit off guard too. But Finnegan sent out his cavalry to lure the Union to their main line. But he ends up having to send out additional troops because they fight pretty hard. And the fighting is beginning 2 miles from the Confederate line, and it's at Ocean Pond. And this is not at all where he needs the fighting to be.
Seymour, like you said, he's expecting this to be militia, but as he gets further and further, it's getting stiffer and stiffer and hard. He just is. He's like,
Yeah,
what the
and they're
hell's going on?
feeding. They're both sides are doing the whole thing where they're feeding their troops in piecemeal as
Mhm.
well, which is a really shitty thing to do in a battle.
You know,
And they're also
and
battling in pine woods too.
right. So, well, yeah, the terrain's gonna be interesting. We'll get to it in a second when they finally kind of they recklessly expose themselves. Both of them do, right?
Ooh.
Now, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on February 20th, Finnegan, don't forget he had that strong position, right?
Yeah.
Where the swamps on the sides, Joker's on the right. Here he is, that whole deal. He's
Mhm.
got a really strong location to fight, and he's going to Leroy Jenkins it out of there for whatever reason. He's near that Olustee Railroad. He knows Seymour's guys are coming, and they're still a few miles away. But instead of waiting, he's going to advance. And what he's going to do is going to send out one of his brigades under Alfred Colquitt. He runs one of his brigades and sends them towards this oncoming rush of Federals. So now instead of waiting to ambush, he's going to go meet them. So he also doesn't know how many Union guys there are.
No.
It was a really, really risky move at the time, and in hindsight, that he did that, because if he stayed where he was, he would have had them in a bottleneck and he would have been shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah.
But he decided to out aggressive Seymour, the aggressive Seymour. He's going to go out and meet him instead.
Is there no intelligence gathering going on either side?
Apparently not, Mary. Have you been to
That they
Florida?
would. God.
Just kidding, maybe.
God.
But it is a strange decision, though, if you think about it, right? Because he has such a clear advantage. And now, instead of that, he's going to fight mano a mano
Mhm.
with Seymour. Now, Seymour is going to approach and he's going to immediately send in his brigade under Joseph Hawley
Yes.
into the fields. Now, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this guy, okay? Now, Hawley's guys are men from the 7th Connecticut under Benjamin Skinner, okay?
Yep.
As well as the 7th New Hampshire under Joseph Abbott, and then members of the 8th United States Colored Troops under Charles Fribley, who we'll talk more about, okay? The problem is, almost immediately, something happens with communications and the whole thing gets screwed up.
Yeah, it's kind of like I don't want to say it's like a Chickamauga thing because they don't go and move an entire division, but something gets screwed up when they were told to form by company into line, and something got miscommunicated along the way. The orders got mixed up and they were all like just all over the place, and they could not reform their line by the time they had to fight. And one guy said the mistake of our commanding officers could not be remedied. The ground was thickly becoming dotted with bodies of the fallen, as well as they're still trying to form into their lines.
Yeah. So Hawley's trying to give his order, okay? And it gets, whatever the order was, it's going to get misinterpreted by the 7th New Hampshire, and all the companies become, watch it now, discombobulated.
Okay? Clusterfuck.
They all get messed up out of position. Henry Little, we talked about him before, that quote about the beautiful Florida sunshine from the 7th. He has this quote: an order was given by General Hawley to deploy columns on the 5th Company, which was the colored company. Colonel Abbott, commander of the 7th New Hampshire, repeated the order clearly and ordered the battalion to face to the right and to the left, when General Hawley, finding himself wrong, said, "On your 8th Company, Colonel Abbott." When again, seeing his mistake, he said, "On your 10th Company, sir." So you can see where this is going.
Yeah.
All the companies except the 10th, having already faced to the right and left, were marching to get in line as though deploying on that 5th Company. And the company trying to deploy in line became greatly embarrassed as being under fire and giving the wrong orders. The battalion became so mixed up that it could not be reformed. So in a nutshell, they were all walking in different directions.
I'm picturing the movie. I'm picturing the movie Stripes right now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right? Exactly what they're doing.
So men stood and fought. They were completely mixed up and confused.
Yeah.
Hawley, ironically, an anti-slavery guy from North Carolina, of all places, he said that it must have been someone else who misunderstood the order, and he didn't take blame for it. What a surprise. So
he's being like Longstreet.
Right.
Nice.
In the end, only one company actually faced the enemy. The rest moved around while under fire and confusion, trying to find out where to go, right? But you know what, though? They still fought hard.
Yep.
Many had those old antiquated muskets.
Yep.
And they were falling right and left as Hawley was really being blamed for that whole fiasco, just like that quote you said.
Yeah, well, it's described as a disorganized mob, which I have another word for that, and that's clusterfuck. Like this is an absolute clusterfuck that they're going through, and the fact that they're still able to fight and fight pretty hard is a miracle. But this is just like, and yeah, Holly's going around saying, "Oh, it wasn't me." He's doing the whole Shaggy thing, right?
He's on the Shaq thing. But you know what? The 7th is taking a beat down. And so what Hawley's going to do now, he's going to put in his 8th U.S. colored troops under Colonel Charles Fribley, right? He's going to put in his 8th.
Yeah.
Now, these USCT troops, they had very, very, very little experience, okay?
They have none. They're organized between September of 1863 and January of 1864 at Camp William Penn. It's in, I think, in Pennsylvania. And they had only been formed for a few months and they had no combat experience, and they're still not completely trained in how to do like the army drilling and the formation. So they're probably getting these orders and they're like, what the fuck are we supposed to do? Like, we even had the training for this, right? They had been mainly like working on railways and stuff, a lot like what we saw the 54th doing like early on in the movie Glory, right? Like just doing kind of stuff like that, not really any combat. But then when it came time for combat, they didn't have the training that they needed for it.
No, they did. You know, Lieutenant Oliver Norton Mary, a white officer in the 8th USCT, he's going to write a couple of books on this war.
Yeah.
He's going to talk about the experiences of the black troops at Olustee, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read again. Okay, it's a fair warning. He writes, "We were double quick for a half a mile and came under fire by the flank. We formed a line with empty muskets while under fire, and before we loaded, many of the men were shot down and were stunned as balls hit their heads and legs, and men curled to the ground like frightened sheep in a hailstorm. They recovered their senses, but did not know how to shoot with effect, and Colonel Fribley, without orders, gave the order to fall back firing as we went." So just like you said, these guys had no experiences.
Yeah.
No experience. They got there. They didn't have their muskets even loaded. They had to load them at the time. And then in the moment, they still don't know how to shoot them.
Yeah. No, they didn't.
And meanwhile, they're getting raked. They're getting drilled. It's a bloodletting while they're standing there, you know?
It is, yeah. And like Norton, he's seen some shit in his time. I mean, he was with Strawn Vitzen at Gettysburg at Little Round Top. So he's seen his fair share of some pretty horrific fighting, right? And he described Olustee as the most destructive fire I ever knew. Color bearer after color bearer was shot down and the color seized by another. And this just kept going on and on and on. And he said, like I said, this is a guy that's seen some shit. And he's seen a lot of it now.
It's on his gravestone, by the way. Seen some shit.
I've seen some shit.
Oliver Norton. Here lies Oliver Norton. Saw some shit. That's what it says on his gravestone.
I thought that was what was on Howard's gravestone.
Oh, please. God. Anyway, but you know what though, as this goes on, I mean, they're going to start to fall back, and Fribley, their colonel, is going to be killed, shot through the heart. He's going to be, he's going to drop instantly.
Did he give Love a bad name?
I think so. I didn't want to say it, but he certainly was. He was living on a prayer, but he didn't make it. No, soon after he goes down, the second in command, a guy named Major Burritt, he's going to be in second in command. He's going to get shot in both legs, and he's going to go down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Norton mentions both of them too.
Right. And it's going to fall to a third guy now, a captain named R.C. Bailey, who is going to take over, and he's going to try to rally the regiment. But you know what? He has no idea what he's doing, and the men know it. And they're like, he's like that guy. He's in charge. The 8th is going to finally retreat, this 8th USCT. They're going to lose over 300 guys in this battle.
Yeah, and they fight hard, though. But isn't this a little bit like what happens at Pea Ridge? Remember at Pea Ridge, like they lost like 2 commanders, and then the one that was like left in charge was like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't want to do this kind of thing.
I mean, he must have had some kind of training, but you don't anticipate, if you're the third,
you don't anticipate being the third.
You're going to get in. You don't think you're going to get in the game as a third string quarterback. That's kind of what happened, right?
Yeah.
Now Bailey's going to do his best, but he's going to ultimately have to fall back. As these USCT guys fall back, the Rebs are going to continue to push forward. Colquitt's aggressive, go, go, go. He's going to move his brigade towards that Union line. And he's going to get support from a brigade of Georgians that are George Harrison, not that George Harrison, Mary, different George Harrison, okay? And at this point, they're going to have a 1 mile long battle line, these Confederates, okay? So they got a real strong line now. You have Colquitt and Harrison together, okay? Seymour is going to try. He's going to try to counterattack, right? He's going to send in a brigade under William Barton, we mentioned a little while ago. They're all New Yorkers, and they're going to be out of the 47th, 48th, and 115th New York regiments. And they're going to step forward to do what they can to kind of stall that rebel onslaught that's
Yep.
coming. And they're going to have some success initially. They're going to stall Colquitt, and they're going to turn the battle at that moment into a stalemate. And the men are going to be standing in this open field, just firing away at each other. And that's the thing is this terrain, Mary, is they're in an open field. They're not in swamps or trees. You know, think of the wheat field at Gettysburg. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah,
and
that's what this is
standing
like.
there, and it's going back and forth and back and forth. Now, the Rebs are going to have problems of their own on this, okay? And it was a part of the residual effects earlier from the retreat of Hawley's Facts. I mean, the Union guys.
Yeah.
When the Union retreated, they left their cannons. They left their artillery because they couldn't take them, right?
Yeah.
So as Colquitt's men are moving forward, they're approaching those cannon. And what do? They start turning the guns and start firing on these New Yorkers, right? And that's going to, again, get that Confederate momentum going again. Barton's going to try to keep Colquitt back by putting 3 regiments into parallel lines. He's going to try to fill an open space left by that 7th New Hampshire and that 8th USCT. But Barton's guys are going to continue to take a beating now. You know how many guys Barton lost? His brigade? 811 guys.
Yeah.
So we're talking about major, major bloodbath for the Union so far.
Yeah, it's not going very well. But then the tide begins to turn a little bit because the Confederates, even though they've captured several of these artillery pieces, they start to run out of ammo. And this is like the point where they start searching the wounded and dead soldiers for more ammo, and it gets really dire for them.
Well, what happens is they're moving so fast that they realize their ordnance train is a half a mile behind. So they can't keep up. That's how fast they're moving. So many of these guys, mainly the 6th Georgia and the 32nd Georgia, they run out. And so, Colonel Harrison, okay, he's commanding that brigade, and he said after the battle, it was whispered down the line, especially in the 6th and 32nd, that the ammunition was failing with no ordnance train in sight. So just like you said, they're rifling the bodies at this point. And Harrison is telling Colquitt, ain't got nothing left. What am I going to do? Colquitt tells him, stand your ground. They have to stay there. Don't move. Imagine that. So Harrison, many of these guys in the 6th and 32nd are literally standing for 20 whole minutes on battle line with a weapon they can't use, just standing there.
Oh my God.
They can't move. So Harrison, he sees what's going on. You know what he's going to do? George Harrison is going to personally gather troops, and they're going to head down the road. We don't know if it was called Penny Lane. Maybe it was. But he's going to gather some guys and head back to that ordnance train. And what they're going to do is they're going to bring weapons. They're going to bring ammo up.
Yeah, and they're also going to bring some reserves up with them too. The 1st Florida Battalion and Bonad's Battalion, and they're going to be able to continue advancing again because this gives them the momentum that they need. And by now it's late afternoon, and Seymour is starting to have second thoughts about what he's done.
Yeah, because now, when Colquitt and Harrison got the ammo back, it was like they still took a little time for them to get them, to fill the cartridge boxes and stuff like that. But once they got all their weapons, it was like a shot of adrenaline, right? So Colquitt's going to again push his men forward, and Seymour, who the thing about Seymour though, which was amazing, he never noticed the slack in fire. He missed a real good opportunity because those guys stood there, a lot of them, with no bullets. And they didn't even notice it. And you want to talk about missing a chance. The writing was, at this point, that was exactly what was going on. But Seymour had to know, just like you said, the writing was on the wall at this point. They're getting driven back. And what he's going to do is he still has one more card to play. At least that's how he thinks.
Yeah.
He still has James Montgomery's brigade, and he's going to put them forward. Now, James Montgomery, he's commanding the 35th USCT, who's under William Reed, as well as the famed 54th Massachusetts of Battery Wagner fame. Robert
I wonder how they felt when they saw Seymour, and they're like, "Oh fuck, it's that guy again."
And what's funny is Montgomery is actually still commanding the regiment with Edward Hollowell, right? Now, speaking of him, by the way, that's where the movie gets him wrong. I don't know if you know that, Mary. Montgomery was a strong abolitionist. He was. He hated the South, and he did punish South Carolina. but the movie made him look like a real prick.
Like a
He just
dick.
did.
Yeah.
But he was actually they actually got that a little bit wrong. But
Yeah.
Montgomery basically had to rush to the battlefield because he got called up, and many of the men in the 54th and the 35th had to drop their backpacks or haversacks, whatever they had,
Mhm.
and run double quick to the field because they had to get there quick. While they're running, they're seeing the dead bodies and the injured men and the people going in the back of the lines, and they know they're in for it. As they go to that spot on the field,
Yeah.
one soldier in the 54th, he said, when we got there, we commenced with severe fighting, and the enemy soon gave way for some 200 yards. So you can see right off the bat, they had a little bit of success. But the thing is, the 35th USCT and the 54th Mass, yes, they are going to slow Colquitt's charge to a point,
Mhm.
but that was not their job. They were not there to set up a defensive line and change momentum, push it back. What they were there for was to slow them down so a lot of Seymour's men could get the F out of Dodge at this point. They were kind of the speed bump they were put in. And Montgomery's guys do slow Colquitt down,
Mhm.
but he's going to continue to drive thanks to that 6th and 32nd Georgia, now all new ammo. They're going to drive towards the Union right flank. On the left flank, you're going to have the 6th Florida, and they're going to kind of push like a cauldron north, or it's actually southeast, but towards the Union.
Yeah.
And what they did is they enveloped them. And so you had Confederates on your right, left, and the middle flank, and the middle. So both your flanks are covered, and your middle's being pushed. And it was just a full envelopment, and they basically were screwed at that point.
Yeah. And as they're, as the Union's retreating, they're having to leave behind their wounded. They're also having to leave behind a large amount of equipment. So be it artillery and ammo and all that, like they're losing a bunch of shit, right? Just because the hasty retreat that they were under. But the Confederate, eventually the Confederates do lose momentum and they can't keep up with them.
Well, no, right. It's getting late in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, there was enough set of an inevitability for the Union. Montgomery's men knew they were beat. They were the last brigade. They had to fall back, but dusk is settling in now. Seymour at this point is going to order a full retreat back to Jacksonville, while those 54th Massachusetts guys, and he had some guys from the 7th Connecticut too, they're going to be in the rear fighting. But at this point, they're doing it exclusively to let the others escape. That's exactly what they're doing.
They become like the 16th Maine.
You know what the 54th Mass does? Because it's dark and they can't see, they start cheering because they think that by cheering, the Rebs think they're going to have reinforcements coming. They try every trick in the book.
I did read that about
right?
them. Yeah.
They try every trick in the book. It doesn't work. So eventually, the fake cheers, that doesn't really work out. They end up turning and hauling ass to get back to Seymour's guys, to get back in the line. And you're right. Colquitt did sort of run out of gas. And Finnegan's like, no, you got to keep going. And Colquitt goes, fuck that. He goes, we've been fighting all day, 3.5 hours. We're tired. It's dark. We ain't doing it. That's probably not what he said to him, but whatever he said to Finnegan, he basically talked him out of pursuing, right? Yeah. So after 3.5 hours, this Battle of Olustee is going to basically come to an end. It's going to be a gigantic Confederate victory. And when you look at the casualties we're going to look at here in a little bit, it's almost exactly 2-1, the Union casualties to the Confederate casualties. But this was, again, a situation where you had white officers and white soldiers watching the fighting of the USCT guys, right? Every time we mention the USCT, we always have a quote where somebody talks about them. We talked about Nashville. We talked about, Wilmington. So I got another one here, Mary. This is from a white officer in the 8th USCT. He's going to write, here we stood for 2.5 hours under one of the most terrible fires I have ever witnessed. And here in the field of Olustee was decided whether the colored man had the courage to stand without shelter and risk the dangers of the battlefield. And when I tell you that they stood with the fire in front, on their flank, and in their rear for 2+ hours without flinching, I have no doubt of the verdict of every man, black or white. So again, what is he saying? He's saying that these guys can fight just like we can.
Yep.
Right. And so you can see the importance of why Florida did have such an important piece.
Exactly.
We mentioned before 180,000 black soldiers infused into the Union right at the part of the war when they were running out of volunteers.
Yeah.
What a difference that made. And you can see how important Florida was.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I have a quote too from one of the white soldiers, and he said that the colored troops went in grandly and they fought like devils. So again, it's this, they're seeing whether the white soldiers are abolitionists or not, they're seeing what these African American troops are capable of, right? And
we don't know if someone yelled, "Give them hell, 54th," when they went in. We don't know if they said that. But I mean, even in that movie, they, you can see that's the case. These guys who doubted the mentality, but they actually proved themselves. So when the battle's all over, the Union had lost 1,900 guys out of the 5,500 engaged, a whopping 35%. It's a staggering number of casualties in a battle. This is 3.5 hours. You lose 35% of your guys. The Confederates, on the other hand, lost 950 out of 500. So they took a bloody nose too.
Yeah.
But this was a situation where it was one absolutely slam dunk Confederate victory, and one that probably Seymour regretted. Sometimes your aggressiveness is a little too come back and get you, Mary.
Yeah, but Seymour doesn't really have. There's no repercussions for him, I don't think, after this. Like he ends up, after this battle happens, just to kind of wrap things up with Seymour, he ends up going back into the Eastern Theater of the war, where he's going to lead Milroy's old brigade as part of the 3rd Division of the 6th Corps at the Battle of Wilderness. He's actually going to be captured in a flank attack by General John Brown Gordon during a battle, but he's eventually exchanged. And just to, show how this all goes full circle, he's going to be present at Lee's surrender at Appomattox. So he is at the beginning of the Civil War, and he's at the very end. And he's also involved in, he's involved in Fort Wagner, but he's also involved in one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, and one of the biggest battle fought in the state of Florida during the Civil War.
There's no question. I mean, the battlefield, it's still there for the most part. 1909, the state of Florida is going to take over the Olustee battlefield from the Daughters of the Confederacy, Mary, who controlled it. That they raised money for over a decade, that the Daughters of the Confederacy to raise a memorial for it. Finally, it was October 23rd, 1912. You had about 4,000 people who attended the dedication ceremony at the Olustee battlefield. It was Florida's first ever military park, for the Civil War. And the thing about Olustee, and I knew this from my Civil War roundtable, that's why Olustee fascinates me, is this one presentation I saw. It is one of the more popular reenactments that you can go to. And as I understand it, what he told me was they actually do the reenactment on the battlefields, which is unique. That's and you got people from all around the country who come down for this reenactment.
Might have to take a road trip to Florida weeks.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely. But the Olustee battlefield and that reenactment, I guess, is quite a thing to see. I guess it's a big deal. Not much happens in Florida after that. It's kind of a bummer because a lot of these guys get taken out, like we said at the beginning. And they don't get to defend their home state. There were some Floridians in this battle. There was a lot of Georgians, right, on the Confederate side. But not much goes after that. The Union maintains Fort Pickens the Holy War. They never give it up.
Yeah,
Florida is kind of an outpost. It's kind of there, but Richmond doesn't really do much to, like we said at the beginning, to defend it. Even after this, they showed they can fight, and they won a slam dunk victory. That's really all you really have out of Florida. It's unfortunate, but a pretty big state down there in deep red Confederate territory is a situation where they have this one battle, but at least they embrace it. It's still there. You can visit it, and it's got quite a little place, and the people there absolutely support it.
Yeah, and there is one dark part of the battle that happens after the battle, and that's that there was like mistreatment of Union black soldiers by the Confederates, which we've heard that before at other battles as well, where the USCT has fought. It's like there was a number of black soldiers that were killed in the battlefield by roaming bands of Southern troops following the close of the fighting, which is it's a dark part of the battle, but it's one that has to be mentioned if you're going to talk about Olustee as well.
I think you have to. I mean, it's a tough place to be. Those thousand black troops who came out of Florida obviously fought hard. and we saw with some of these other episodes we've done how people from their home states, we talk about, North Carolina with Wilmington, how hard they fought for the states, that they're from. And it's no different here. But again, people talk about the 54th Mass. You think that it's a one and done situation with Battery Wagon, with Robert Gould Shaw. They went on and they fought here. And they fought valiantly
under the
here.
same guy that made them go forth at Fort Wagner. So I can't imagine how they felt when they saw. They're like, oh God, it's him again.
Well, it's tough, So you have Montgomery, you've got Edward Needles Hallowell, who's gonna command them too. But again, something, it just shows the valor, it shows the fighting effort that these guys had, in what an important part of American history in the Civil War, that these USCT guys were. So I think Olustee is a good battle. I'm glad we did this one. I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad I was able to talk you into this one. Pretty rare situation of me coming up with an idea this time. I think it's the second one of the 75.
Dude. Jeez, you've come up with plenty of great ideas.
I'm just kidding. So what's coming up for us next? We don't really know, do we?
No, we don't. We got to decide. So we will decide at some point what our next. Usually, we're way more prepared for stuff, but our first year was pretty easy with okay, we'll do this battle. Now we're having to kind of dig a little bit deeper and look at some of these battles that don't get talked about as much, which is awesome. We managed 3 episodes on Fort Fisher and Wilmington, which was awesome. And then Olustee, I am so happy we did it. I'm so happy you suggested it, because it is a very interesting battle to study, and it's a very important one in the Civil War, because you have the USCT there, but it's also one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War as well. That just doesn't get talked about. And there's some interesting.
It tells a great story. Because how often are people going to talk about Truman Seymour? You mentioned the guy
exactly
who was getting to the end. Famous painter. He's someone like that. Not a lot of people know who he is. Certainly nobody knows guys like Joseph Finnegan, our rich railroad robber baron from Ireland, who comes and
takes his house.
But there's a lot of great people involved with this stuff, and it is and there's so many people that make up this crazy American Civil War we like to talk about, and I think every one of these people deserves a voice and deserves their story to be told. So that's why it's a lot of fun doing these.
Exactly. I think as much as it's cool to study William Tecumseh Sherman, study Seymour as well, because he's an interesting figure too with what he does during the Civil War as well as afterwards, with being he's a painter. His paintings are in galleries in Europe, and that's really, really cool.
It is cool.
But as well to talk about the United States colored troops as well, which is a story in the Civil War that doesn't get talked about enough. So I'm glad we're touching on it.
Especially during Black History Month, right?
Exactly. So yes.
So we are going to drop this episode on YouTube soon, but it is going to be on our regular podcast channels, the Spotify's and Podbeans and all that stuff, Apple. On the 26th of February, we're going to take a week. We get some stuff going on. And we are going to be pushing our roundtable, which was supposed to be tomorrow. When this drops, it won't matter.
Exactly. If you're watching this on YouTube, our roundtable is going to be next Wednesday. So if you've never attended before, 6 p.m. via Zoom, Eastern Standard Time, info@civilwarbreakfastclub.com. We will send you an invite. It's just, get together and nerd out about the Civil War with a great group of people.
A lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. All right. So let's call it a day, Mary. We are off to our next thing with our next subject to be determined. Everyone out there, again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we appreciate the support as always. And Mary, as always, you bring it like you always do. You intro again. Fantastic intro, but the rest of the stuff was equally really, really, really good. Anyway, so any final words from you, Fincheru?
Well, you brought it as well. I learned a lot from you from this battle, and you really you always bring it every single week. You give 110%, so that's awesome. You're an amazing co-host, so thank you.
I appreciate that, and you are as well. So everybody, thanks. Have a great, safe weekend. Hope it's gonna be warming out where you are. Hopefully it stays dry, and we will talk to you all, as we like to say, on the other side.
Uncle Mary.
Peace out, everybody.
See you guys later. Bye.